All right, I will start the lesson. Today we will learn about the real meaning of Golgotha. What is Golgotha and where is Golgotha? And there's a lot of misunderstanding from the West about the meaning of it and its location. And we're going to go dig deeper throughout linguistics, throughout archaeology, and throughout history. But first, I would like to start with scripture. And Golgotha is a term that refers to a site just outside Jerusalem. And till today, there is a controversy about this site. Where is it located? Is it the Golgotha is the garden tomb, what you see here, or is it the Holy Sepulchre? And which one is the location where Jesus Christ was crucified? This is what we will tackle today. And the name Golgotha is from the Aramaic, Golgotha, which literally means a skull. From the Greek, it's called cranion. And the general Greek term for cranion is also a bald skull. And from Latin, calvaria, which is a bald head or skull-shaped hell, calvaria. And it's known in English, Calvary. But I just want to tell you that the translations from the original Golgotha, which is a skull, to Calvaria, which is a skull-shaped hell, is wrong translation from the Greek. So it's not a skull-shaped hell. That's mindset came to the West because of the Latin. And it's mentioned by the four Gospels. And I'm going to read for you each Gospel and give some interpretation. And I'm going to start first with Matthew 27, 33 and 35. Because all the four Gospels testify that it was the place of Jesus' crucifixion. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Golgotha. So here, Matthew is mentioning the Aramaic, and he described that they came to a place called Golgotha. And Matthew doesn't directly answer the question of why Golgotha or what does it mean, but he uses the term, the Aramaic term Golgotha, which was the name of a hill near Jerusalem where executions took place. Let us see what Mark tells us. Mark 15:22. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Mark provides the most direct answer to the question of why Golgotha. What does it mean? As he recounts and he says, they brought him to the place of Golgotha. So this is important. Brought Jesus. So they took him to a special place. From this Mark's account, we may understand the place is simply named Golgotha. And the association with the skull was only a translation. But of course, that would still not provide an answer as to why the name Golgotha was used in the first place. As I tell you, the exact location is still controversial to today. And today we do not know exactly or can determine whether the terrain resembles a skull or the shape of the Golgotha or the hill looks like a skull, which we're going to dig deeper into it. And let us see what Luke 23:33 says. When they came to the place called the skull, they crucified him there along with criminals, one his right, the other on his left. So when they came to the place called skull, Luke uses the word skull from, literally, from the Greek translation, okay? And the word skull, kranoion. And then from the kranoion Greek, they used the Latin calvaria. So here is a direct translation from also Latin. And he mentions one more important thing. He was crucified along with criminals. all right? One on the right and one to the left. So we see that this is a location for crucifixion, also for criminals, all right? So that's an important point. And let us see what John says. My favorite is John. Look what it says in 1917. Carrying his own cross, he went out the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. So John make it clear and direct that it's called Golgotha in Aramaic. Adding, they took Jesus, you see here, carrying his own cross. He went out to the place of the skull. So Jesus was carrying his own cross. And by the way, cross doesn't mean a cross like shape of a cross. It's a wooden beam, which we're going to talk about. His own wooden beam to the place called Golgotha. And this is where they crucified him. And it's worth noting that only later the Latin translation used the term Calvaria, all right? But the original one, Aramaic, is Golgotha. And again, the Latin Calvaria is where the term Mount Calvary was derived to the Western mindset. So it's only a later translation, not first century translation. So the term Calvary is only used later from the Latin by the King James translation. And this is where all the West uses Calvary. Anyway, both Golgotha and Calvary have become part of popular vocabulary for the Western Church, but they use more Calvary today. So the bottom line, Golgotha is the place of the skull. So it is a physical, geological location, okay? The skull has the names like the skull, why it was called, the exact reason. The skull, because only of the Aramaic. And I'm going to give you a few points. It was the place of execution. It's very clear. So people were executed, people died there. And it was a public execution. And skulls were left lying around after people had been executed, which I'm going to expand more on that. Now, it doesn't say that the hill was shaped like a skull in original first century and early church fathers. Only later, with the General Gordon, the Garden Tomb, and only later, General Gordon has mentioned, and he said when he was like at Spafford House in 1882, and he was looking at the hill. Let me show you the image of Charles George Gordon. And by the way, his name is General or Major Charles George. And in Chinese, he was in China, sent by the British to different parts of the world. China, he was sent to Sudan, and finally he was in the Holy Lands with the British mandate. But little bit history about him, you know. I don't know if you know his personality. Charles George was having personality problems. He was, by the way, bipolar, and he was sent by the British also to Sudan, because Sudan at that time in the 1880s was under Egypt control, and later was invaded and occupied by the British because of strategic interest. So the British oversaw the majority of Egyptian affairs, and they were governing the Sudan area. And he was sent there in exactly 1884. And he was sent to make a military blockade of Khartoum. Khartoum is the capital of Sudan, against the forces of Mahdi, al-Mahdi. These are forces extreme. And Charles, like George, was eventually able to put off some of these riots. And later also he came to the area of the Holy Land, and he was sitting outside Damascus Gate, and he was hosted by the Spafford family. And I don't know if you know about the Spafford family and the history of the Chicago fire. And he was having his gin and tonic outside Damascus Gate in the Spafford's house. And he looked out and he saw a hill that looked like Calvary. And he said that this is the place of Golgotha. And this is the tradition came from that time. Okay, so there is no relation. It looks like a shape of a skull. The bottom line is only a Western interpretations. I want to go to more deeper historical resources, and such as the historian Josephus Flavius. In his book on the war between the Jews and the Romans, he mentions a gate in Jerusalem called the Geneth Gate. By the way, Geneth is an Aramaic word. And by the way, Josephus Flavius wrote all of his books in Aramaic because that was the language of the people, and then was translated to Greek. But the bottom line, there was something called in Jerusalem called the Geneth Gate. Josephus mentions that Geneth, which literally means a garden, okay, and that Jesus was crucified outside the garden gate. And usually in the Middle Eastern traditions, in the ancient cities of Jerusalem, such as Jerusalem or Damascus, the city gates are usually named after what they lead to or upon existing things. For example, Jaffa Gate in Jerusalem leads to Jaffa, all right? So Damascus Gate will lead to Damascus. So the Geneth Gate will lead to a garden or a hill outside Jerusalem. I want to show you a map that shows where we think is the Geneth Gate, most scholars. So I don't know if you know Jaffa Gate. This is the area of Jaffa Gate, and there's a road, David Street, and this road go all the way down. And let me show you first easy a map of Jerusalem from the time of Josephus that mentions there are 3 walls surrounding Jerusalem. This is the first wall here, okay, and that goes all the way around. This is the first wall. Then we have the second wall built at the time of Jesus, and we have the third wall all the way out. And in the Bible, it's written that Jesus was crucified outside the walls of Jerusalem, which is the second wall. And Josephus Flavius mentions for us, it's outside the Geneth Gate. So here in the second wall, there is something called the Geneth Gate. Let me make this picture more clear. This is the Holy Sepulchre of today, and this is the area, the 3 possible areas. There's not much excavations took place. We don't know precisely where is the Geneth Gate or the Garden Gate, but according to 3 archaeologists, these are the 3 possible locations, 1, 2, 3. But anyway, that is the David Street today, and that is the second wall. And according to scripture, Jesus was crucified outside the second wall. So outside here, a gate will stand here, and outside there will be a garden. And in that garden is the area of Golgotha, which makes us nearby the Holy Sepulchre. There is another map, I can show it to you here. This is the first wall, and this is outside the second wall, like the Bible tells us, and this is a hill here, Golgotha. And here is the possible area of the Geneth Gate according to Josephus Flavius. But I want to show you something different now. I want to go to linguistic and share with you about the etymology and the meaning of the word Golgotha in Aramaic, which will lead us to understand more the location. Write in Aramaic. For the people who took the class with me in Aramaic, they can follow up. But I'm gonna write in ancient Aramaic, and I'll explain myself. Old Aramaic from the time of Jesus. You know, Aramaic is different on the period of history because languages develops. So Golgotha in Aramaic, this is how we write it. This is Gomal, the alphabet Gomal. This is the alphabet wow. Then the low mad. Then the gomal. So gol, go, the wow. Then the tau. And then the olaf. So this is Golgotha in Aramaic. But the language developed later, and then they came with the vowels. So this is now the 4th century Aramaic, Gomal, Gomal. And then the vowels came. This is the vowel, oo. Instead of wow, we don't read it anymore. We put the vowel, and then we put the low mad, and then gomal, and then the vowel, golgo, the tau, and the olaf, Golgotha. And I will read for you from the 2 Kings 9:35 about Golgotha and what it says in the original English, and then go to the etymology from the Hebrew and the Aramaic. So this is 2 Kings 9:35. And they went to bury her, but they found no more of her than the skull. This is the English translation. And the feet and the palms of her hands. But Hebrew, וילכו לקברה ולא מצאו בה כי אם הגולגולת. You see here? Golgolet, not a skull, Golgolet. So let us go to the etymology of the word. I use Blue Letter Bible. Anyone can do this research, by the way. And here is Golgolet, Golgolet in Hebrew, all right? And here to the Strongs, it's very important. You always click here the number in order to do the research, and it gets you to the meaning of the Hebrew, in the meaning of the skull, Golgolet, in Hebrew and in Aramaic. And look what Golgolet in Hebrew says, okay? A skull or round, okay? A head, a round head. So what Golgotha really means in Aramaic, from the root galgal, which literally means when people are executed and crucified, they are hanged on the cross and left from the cross till they die. And after they die, the skulls will go down and roll in a specific place. So that's the meaning in Aramaic of Golgotha, Golgolet, the place where all the skulls are gathered and buried there. And in Hebrew says Galgalim. By the way, Galgalim in Hebrew literally means wheels, wheels. Let me get to the Aramaic. Here is the Aramaic. I wrote it for you here, Galgalet, okay? And it's a place where the skulls fall down and gather. Let me get you more now historical evidences and information, what is, and facts about Golgotha. You know, when people was going to be crucified in the 1st century, we know, historians, they were completely naked to humiliate them. And also, not only men was crucified, women and children were also crucified. And they were all stripped naked. And women were facing the cross in the backside as a modesty, from like the men from the front side. And we know that guards forced to stay the whole duration of crucifixion. And they have to have the same guard even sleeping under the cross if the criminal did not die. This is why they break your legs to die quicker. And after legs broken, cannot take a breath, they will die quicker. And by the way, the movies make it like there's a stab of wood that people will step on them. No, that is not correct. The Romans do not want you so much on the cross. and they leave you to die. But we know Joseph of Arimathea asked from Pontius Pilatus specifically to get him, Jesus, to be buried. But normally, they are not buried. They left there till they die. I'm going to give you also some more information about that. You know, nails were made from iron. And we know from Josephus Flavius that they don't nail you from your hands, all right? And it's not about the hands, okay? And what they do, they nail you from your elbow, all right? Which is much more painful, or from the wrist here. And then they wrap a rope around it and they hands up, extremely painful, and they wrap you around the cross. So it's not here, okay, the nails. It's in the arm, somewhere in the arm. And nails were made of iron, and iron was rare. So because it was rare, they pulled the nails and kept them to use them again after the person died. And this is why in archaeology, we did not rarely find iron nails from the 1st century. And you have to know that the nails were from 5 to 7 inches long and 3/4 thick, will make quite a hole in a person's arm. Another fact, you know, when Jesus, when you're on the cross, also slaves are crucified, okay? Because out of 1 or 2 of Jews in the Roman time, 2 out of 10, they will be slaves. And if the slaves do a rebellion against their masters, they will be crucified, even if you're a child slave, even if you're a woman slave, even if you have a family, all the family will be crucified. And by the way, the criminals are being crucified, and it's not thieves like you think, one to the right and one to the left of Jesus were crucified. Thieves, like, is wrong translation from the English. The original words are zealots. They are against the Roman government. All right, they are criminals. Okay, they done something wrong, so this is why they have been crucified. And Jesus was crucified between these 2 zealots, murderers, killers. And they recognized, one of them, that Jesus did not done anything wrong and that he was the Messiah. And by the way, when you are crucified as a Jew, you always, in Golgotha, there's a special section there that only for Jews. You don't get crucified with other Gentiles. They will die. This is what we know from history, and they will die because they stop breathing. They give up. Stop breathing as a rule. They were left on the cross. That was the only rule, to show others what you deserve and what happens to you if you rebel against Rome. Whether you are a slave, you are against your master, whether you are a zealot, anyone against Romans will be crucified to death. But by the way, somehow Pilate broke the rule when Joseph of Arimathea came to him, because he had connections, and he broke their protocol and allowed them to take the body of Jesus and put him in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. And again, we know that no burial was given to the crucified. All right? And according, listen to this, to Jewish tradition, the soul hovers around the body for 3 days. And this is the reason why Jews and Jesus had to be spent 3 days in the tomb. And because if he walked out on the next day, no one will be amazed. They will say his soul entered his body again. In the 1st century, death was not easily defined like today, okay? So this is why the body will decay, start to decay in the 3rd day, because of the humid climate in the Holy Land. And this is why you anoint the body with spices, lay down covered with certain linen after a 3-day watch. And this is why the woman came to anoint his body. And by the way, they used to put, we know from history, they used to put a bell in the coffin or in the place of burial. And if the dead woke up, he will ring the bell. They will quickly dig the person up and save his life. Anyway, more information. All of this information, I want you to understand Golgotha. Most Roman crosses were shaped like, not what you think like a cross, like a beam, all right? It's like an upright post and a cross beam, which placed after a victim had been tied or nailed to it. The cross beam normally weigh about 100 pounds. Imagine that. Was carried on the back of the victim to the place of execution. According to the Roman law, once a criminal was convicted, he was to carry his own cross. And that's, people think it's a long distance. It's not a long distance, okay? And let me show you here a map. Here we see the garden tomb, and then here we see also a map of Jerusalem from the Second Temple period. And according to this model, this is the first wall here, and then we have the second wall outside, and this is Golgotha, okay? And this is the place of execution, okay? And here will be somewhere this area, Ganath Gate. Here we have a map of Jerusalem from the Second Temple period. And here is the place of execution I was talking about, all right? So this is the first wall, Herod's palace, here, this area. This is the second wall that was built during Jesus' time, and this is the third wall was built later, all right? You see, this is all later. But when Jesus was here in the first century, I don't know if you see here, you see like a place of execution, like a rock. This is the Golgotha, and here is the area of Ganath Gate, what Josephus Flavius tells us. So outside the garden. So here we have a strong tradition. This is the place of crucifixion, this area. And you know, when the Romans will just execute and crucify you, your body will remain, okay? And the vultures flow overhead, and they start devouring, and they're dying like crops hanging from the tree. And of course, after then the skull will fall down, and this is the word Golgotha as, and this become like the place later of crucifixion. And we know that what was like every criminal, they will put the reason on the top of why he was crucified, okay? And we know that, look what the scripture tells us. Many of the Jews read this sign, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, all right? And the sign was written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. So every criminal will have a sign. And the sign will hold King of the Jews, Yeshua Melech HaYehudim. Let me give you more facts about Golgotha, okay? So we have the garden tomb. Here, as I show you, Calvary, what General Gordon saw. And here is the garden tomb, okay, according to Google. And everyone loves the garden tomb, and I love the garden tomb, but we know archaeologically is not the site. This is there's something in history called a weak tradition and something called a strong tradition. The garden tomb location is a very weak tradition. The only time we hear about it is only from General Gordon. That's modern history. But this is a topographical map. And here is the garden, but I want you to see this is old tombs. And by the way, this is the head of Calvary, what you call. It's a Muslim cemetery today. And this is the bus station, and the skull shape will look here, will be in this area. But I want to point for you an area after the garden tomb. Here there is a wall. No one knows about this. And I want you to see that there is a rock formation. Do you see these trees? It's one vicinity. But only in the 19th century it was divided. It is one vicinity. And do you see this rock formation? All this rock formation are tombs. Only you see the back of one of the tombs. We have more than 14 tombs in this area. The garden tomb will show you only one of them. So the others are all from the Old Testament, all right? Not from Jesus' time, the tomb. Is from earlier period in history. And here is Saint-Étienne, this is the French scholars, the French fathers, that here is a huge cemetery from the first temple period. So the tomb we see, architect is from the first temple period. And this is way earlier tomb site. Of course, where our tombs, it's a continuation of tombs till today. And this is today why we have a huge Muslim cemetery. You will not see how big is that cemetery unless you look at Google Earth. So again, this is a weak tradition. But the Holy Sepulchre is much more a stronger tradition. I can give you 15 evidences that the Holy Sepulchre is the right place of Jesus, the location of Jesus' crucifixion. It's a strong tradition. I will not go through all of them, but maybe I'll go through three maybe, because in the area of Golgotha, of the Holy Sepulchre, there is tombs from the time of Jesus, okay? In this area, we have a lot of tombs from the Second Temple period, all right? And let me show you more pictures here of the church. And the church is really like, you don't see the original hill because the Crusaders had built on top of it. Another example is, another evidence, we have all the bishop names and the preachings from the early tradition, from the 4th century till today, a continuation of a strong tradition that this is the location of the area of Golgotha. And by the way, this is the top of Golgotha. And here you see a window. It's covered by glass because many pilgrims from the later early church, 4th century, were coming and taking the stones. And when you take the stones, you chisel it out. There is no more Golgotha, but they covered it to protect it. And this is the top of it. And here there is an opening. You can put your hand and touch the original top of the Golgotha. And even there's a continuation of traditions. Even we hear about Bishop Eusebius writing about the location is here in the area of Jaffa Gate outside the second wall of Jerusalem. There is an early Christian leader named Origen who lived from 185 to 533, this is 2nd century, which means only 100 years after Jesus. He recorded that Jesus was crucified on the spot where Adam was buried and where his skull had been found. There is an early tradition, an early church father, that where Jesus is crucified, or the place of Golgotha, why it was there? Because Adam is burial place in that location. Where Jesus was crucified and died is where Adam's skull is located. Through Adam, sin entered to humanity. Through Jesus, sin went outside humanity. Adam is the first man, Jesus is the last man. This is a strong early tradition church that we don't hear about it in the West, and that confirms that the real Golgotha is outside the area of Jaffa Gate, because Jesus is the second Adam. Now, I want to just conclude. So Golgotha is not a shape, an oval shape like hell that looks like a skull. It's only made because of mistranslation from Calvary in King James time, and from the Latin, from the Greek to the Latin, and from the Latin to a skull shape, hell, then to General Gordon saying it looks like a skull, all right? But the original, we have evidences from Josephus Flavius. It's outside the Genef Gate, outside the Garden Gate, which is not far from Jaffa Gate. All bishops, Eusebius, early church father, we have even Emperor Hadrian when he came first to Jerusalem and he asked the Christians, Where is the most important place for the crucifixion of Jesus, Emperor Hadrian? And everyone pointed for him this location, outside the walls, the Holy Sepulchre. It was not a church yet, but what did he do? He just covered it completely, and he built a temple for Aphrodite, 2nd century AD, a Roman temple. And by doing that, he covered the original tomb of Jesus. So by doing that, he marked the location of the tomb. And later, Queen Helena came in the 4th century, and she asked the locals, where is Jesus' tomb? They told her Emperor Hadrian had built on top of it. And what she had done, she demolished it completely. And out of good intentions, demolishing completely the temple for Hadrian, Aphrodite's temple, she destroyed the original tomb of Jesus. So the original tomb of Jesus does not exist today because of Queen Helena, did not know much archaeology, and she destroyed the original tomb covered by Emperor Hadrian. And later she built the first Holy Sepulchre, first big church, 4 times bigger than this. And what we see today is the Crusader church, only from the 11th century. Because of today is Good Friday, I just thought to talk about really where is Golgotha and what is Golgotha and what does it mean, Golgotha. And it's not a hill, looks like a skull. It literally means Golgotha means a skull of a human is the place where the skulls are gathered in the Aramaic mindset. Golgotha, Galgal, Galgalet in the original Aramaic and Hebrew is where the skulls are gathered together in one location, the place of execution outside the walls of Jerusalem, the second walls of Jerusalem.